Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to sift through complex information and pull out those key nuggets of knowledge, basically helping you get genuinely well informed. And today we're taking a fascinating plunge into something really foundational, the toolkit sociologists use. You know, how they actually study society. Our mission today is really to unpack the big debates shaping how we study human behavior. We'll walk you through the actual step-by-step process sociologists follow. Think of it like a behind-the-scenes look. How do we even begin to know things about the social world? Get ready for some real aha moments about how the data you see every day actually gets made. Okay, let's get into it. At the very heart of sociological research, there's this fundamental question: should sociology be treated just like a natural science, like physics or biology, or is it something else entirely? And this brings us straight to two really powerful competing ideas: positivism versus interpretivism.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is just how different these lenses are. I mean, they offer entirely different ways of seeing. So you've got the positivists, right? People like the early sociologists like Ghost Comte. They basically believe the social world can be studied just like the natural world. No difference.
So they're hunting for universal laws, kind of like social physics.
Exactly like that, yeah. Positivists argue that our behavior, human behavior, it's influenced by these measurable things they call social facts.
Mm,
Think of them as external forces, societal structures, norms, stuff you can actually quantify.
okay.
And they believe that by measuring these social facts carefully, sociologists can discover these universal laws governing how society works, much like physicists finding laws of gravity. So this means they really favor quantitative data, numbers, statistics.
Right, the measurable stuff.
Precisely. Social surveys, questionnaires, official statistics, those are their go-to methods. And the big goal for them is striving to be completely objective, completely value-free.
That makes a certain kind of sense, that drive for objectivity. But this is where it gets really interesting for me, because the interpretivists, they come at it from, well, almost the opposite angle.
Totally.
They argue that, look, humans aren't just rocks or atoms reacting to forces. We have consciousness, we have free will, and crucially, we attach unique meanings to what we do.
Exactly. That's the core of it. So interpretivists argue if you really want to understand society, you can't just count things. You need to understand those meanings, the interpretations people have.
So less about universal laws, more about subjective experience.
Spot on. They're way less concerned with finding grand universal laws. They're much more interested in exploring the subjective experiences of individuals, the lived reality. They see social reality as something that's actively constructed through shared meanings and interactions. It's not just out there like a rock.
So that leads them to different kinds of data, I assume.
Absolutely. It pushes them towards qualitative data. Rich, descriptive information. Stuff that gives you depth. Think about methods like unstructured interviews, where you really let the conversation flow. Or participant observation, where the researcher actually joins the group they're studying.
Immersing themselves.
Right, immersing themselves. Or ethnography, which is like a deep, detailed study of a particular culture or community. They're aiming for that deep, empathetic understanding, verstehen, as Max Weber called it. Getting inside people's heads almost.
So, okay, if a positivist gives you a statistic on, I don't know, crime rates, the interpretivist might give you the life story of someone involved in crime, trying to understand their motivations, their worldview.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it completely shifts what counts as knowledge or truth about society.
It really does. So when you encounter some research, say, in the news, understanding this distinction helps you ask, okay, wait, is this giving me a number or is it telling me a story?
Exactly that. And maybe even more importantly, what kind of truth is being presented here? Does the big number, the statistic, even if it seems objective, does it maybe miss the human experience behind it?
Mm-hmm.
But then again, does the really rich, detailed story, while compelling, does it apply more broadly? Can we generalize from it? Think about policymakers trying to tackle something like, say, homelessness. Do they rely on the statistics, the numbers of people affected, demographics, that kind of thing? That's the positivist angle.
Right.
Or do they listen to the in-depth stories, the personal narratives of people experiencing homelessness? That's the interpretivist angle. Often, they probably need both. But the approach they start with definitely shapes the questions they ask and the solutions they consider.
Okay, so we've got these two big philosophical camps on how to study society. But then there's another huge question, isn't there? What about the researcher themselves? Can their own beliefs, their values truly be kept out of the picture?
The value debate. Yeah, this is another fundamental one.
Can research ever be truly neutral?
Well, if you ask a committed positivist, the answer is a very firm no. Or rather, it shouldn't be influenced by values. They strongly believe sociology must be value-free.
Like a pure science.
Exactly. Researchers should remain completely objective, totally neutral, to prevent any personal bias creeping in.
Yeah.
This is absolutely core to their view of sociology as a science. They want findings that anyone could replicate, regardless of their personal views. Like testing gravity, it works the same whether you like it or not.
But, I mean, you have to wonder, is that actually possible? We're humans studying other humans. Can we really switch off our own perspectives, our own backgrounds?
That's precisely the challenge raised by interpretivists and other critical sociologists. They'd say it's not only practically impossible, but maybe it's not even desirable to be completely value-free.
Why not desirable?
Well, the argument is that values inevitably influence the research process right from the start. What topics do we even choose to study? It's often driven by what we think is important, which is a value judgment.
Yeah.
And then, how do we frame the questions? Which methods do we pick? How do we interpret the findings? Their point is that our values are kind of embedded in all those choices, whether we admit it or not.
So if values are always going to be part of the equation, what then? Just throw your hands up.
Well, not exactly. This is where thinkers like Howard Becker came in with a, let's say, provocative idea. He argued that since you can't be truly value-free, sociologists should perhaps be open about their values. And specifically, he suggested they should consciously take the side of the underdog.
The underdog.
Meaning intentionally focusing their research on giving a voice to groups who are often ignored or marginalized by society. You know, the powerless, the poor, minority groups, people whose perspectives don't usually make the headlines.
So it's an acknowledgement that research has power, and maybe that power should be used consciously.
Precisely. It's saying research isn't neutral territory. It has consequences. So instead of pretending neutrality, perhaps researchers should be explicit about whose side they are on, ethically speaking. This really pushes you, when you read a study, to ask not just what they found, but whose story is being told here, whose perspective is being amplified. And just as importantly, whose might be silenced or overlooked. It makes you critically examine the power dynamics within the research itself.
Wow, okay. So, positivism versus interpretivism, value-free versus value-committed. These are some deep waters. But let's get practical. If you're a sociologist, you've thought about these things, and you're ready to actually do some research. How does it work? What's the process? Like, it can't just be random.
Oh, absolutely not. It's actually a very structured, systematic process. You can think of it almost like following a recipe, step by step, to ensure things are done rigorously.
Okay, so walk us through it. Where does the recipe start?
It starts with aims and hypotheses. You need a clear starting point. What's the question you're trying to answer? What problem are you investigating? You need a clear aim, otherwise you're just sort of fishing.
Makes sense.
And often this leads to a hypothesis. That's basically a testable statement, an educated guess about the relationship between things, something you can actually try to prove or disprove with your data. For example, a classic one might be, children from middle-class backgrounds are more likely to achieve higher grades in school. It gives you a research focus.
Got it. Clear question, maybe a testable hypothesis. What's next? I remember you mentioned operationalization earlier. Sounds technical.
It sounds technical, but it's absolutely crucial. Operationalization is all about making abstract ideas measurable. Sociology deals with big concepts like social class, power, alienation, religiosity.
Right, things that aren't immediately obvious how to count or observe.
Exactly. So operationalization is the process of defining exactly how you're going to measure that abstract concept in your specific study. How do you define social class? Is it income level, type of job, level of education, maybe a combination? You have to decide how you're going to turn the concept into something concrete you can actually gather data on. This step is critical because your definition shapes everything that follows. If you define class differently, you'll get different results.
Okay, so you define your terms clearly. Then what? Do you just jump into the main study?
Not usually, no. Smart researchers will often conduct a pilot study first.
Like a trial run.
Exactly. It's a small-scale dress rehearsal of your main research plan. You try out your questionnaire on a few people, or conduct a couple of practice interviews, or test your observation schedule. The point is to iron out any kinks before you invest all the time and resources into the full study. Maybe your questions are confusing. Maybe the interview takes too long. Maybe your sampling method isn't working. The pilot study helps you catch those problems early.
That sounds incredibly sensible. Avoid disaster later. Okay, pilot study done, method refined. Now you need people to study, right? But you can't study everyone.
Precisely. That brings us to sampling. Since it's usually impossible and unnecessary to study the entire population you're interested in, like all teenagers or all factory workers, you need to select a smaller group, a sample, that represents the larger population.
And how you choose that sample matters a lot, I guess.
Hugely. The goal is usually to get a sample that's representative, meaning it reflects the characteristics of the larger group. There are various ways to do this. You might use random sampling, where everyone in the population has an equal chance of being picked, or stratified sampling, where you make sure different subgroups, like different ethnicities or age groups, are represented in the right proportions. Or sometimes for hard-to-reach groups, you might use snowball sampling. You find one person and ask them to refer you to others. The method you choose depends on your research question and the population, but getting the sample right is key if you want to generalize your findings.
Okay, clear aims, concepts defined, method tested, sample selected. Now it's time for the main event.
Now it's time for collecting data. This is where you actually go out and use your chosen method, administer the survey, conduct the interviews, carry out the observations, analyze the documents, whatever it is, you follow the plan you've carefully developed.
Right, gathering the raw material. And once you have that pile of surveys or interview transcripts or observation notes,
Then comes the analysis, analyzing data and drawing conclusions. This is where you make sense of it all. You look for patterns, themes, statistical correlations, connections. You interpret the information. For quantitative data, this might involve statistical tests. For qualitative data, it might involve identifying key themes or narratives in interview transcripts. You then relate your findings back to your original aims and hypothesis. Did the data support your hypothesis? Did it refute it? Or maybe suggest something more complex?
that's where the insights really emerge, I suppose. And is that the end? You write it up and you're done.
Almost. There's one more crucial step, especially for good ethical research, and that's evaluating the research.
Evaluating your own work.
Yes, critically reflecting on it. What were the strengths of the study? What were its weaknesses or limitations? Could anything have biased the results? This involves thinking about key issues like validity. Did this study actually measure what it intended to measure? And reliability, could someone else replicate the study and likely get similar results? Being honest about limitations is really important for scientific integrity.
That self-critique sounds vital. It shows the whole process isn't just about finding the answer, but about a rigorous, ongoing inquiry.
Exactly. It's a cycle.
Yeah.
Good research often raises as many questions as it answers, leading to the next study.
It really highlights how deliberate every single stage is. Understanding society isn't just guesswork, it's this really thoughtful, structured process, full of these crucial choices and potential pitfalls at every turn.
It really is a toolkit, and knowing how and when to use each tool and understanding its strengths and weaknesses is key.
So we've certainly had a deep dive today. We've unpacked those fundamental debates, positivism versus interpretivism, the role of values, and we've walked through that structured research process from aims right through to evaluation. Hopefully you now have a much clearer picture of the choices, the challenges, everything sociologists grapple with when they try to understand our incredibly complex social world. We really hope this exploration of the sociological toolkit leaves you feeling not just, better informed, but actually empowered. Because next time you come across a statistic or read about a new study or hear some big claim about society, you can pause and ask yourself, wait, how did they know that? What assumptions underpin this? Whose perspective is centered here? Asking those questions. Now, that's a truly powerful thing to take away.